I thank the ArtiFactory to give me this opportunity to share with you a few of the stories, sort of biopsies of my life, and some artwork that will that has given birth to some of these stories. Sharing stories and artwork and learning about art actually connects us to each other, especially in the post-COVID era. This is something that I missed immensely in those 2.5 years that we have been isolated from each other. So this is such a welcome thing, and welcome guests and welcome old friends, and let's hope that we keep this going before so that next virus doesn't arrive. So, Bob, you mentioned listening to my stories. The reason they were listening to my stories was because they were mesmerized at the time, and because of the cookies that I brought. These cookies, the chocolate chip cookies that I made every Thursday and brought them in warm. And Phil loved these. And actually, as Phil was in hospice, I brought them. That is one of the last things that he ate. And I could actually feel the pleasure, see the pleasure in his face. Now, so what happened is that this was the best thing that ever happened to us. When I retired, we moved to Iowa City. Because of these two little girls and that boy in the back, the young man in the back, that I was making calzones for him, and I was carrying these two so that they would fall asleep. I had tendinitis, and so I was not much into art. I doodled in between operations, and I drew schemas for my patients. To explain to them what where the gallbladder was and what the possible complications would be. But until I arrived in Guatemala, I was really not much into art. But the important thing about art is this story is going to come to the art museum, our new art museum. So we are in front of the mural, the right side. I'm drawing Ruthie, and Ruthie is drawing a bust over there. And as I took this paper out, this little slip of paper fell from between the papers. And there was that drawing on it. I remembered that was, and I showed it to Ruthie. I said, "You remember this?" Said, "Of course," she said, "that is my chair." That was early June. I had taken them to music class, and we were waiting for Sawyer's violin lesson to finish, and she looked at that and immediately knew something that had happened 3 months ago or 4 months ago. And instantly, that windy day, but it was still hot, it became to us. That is how our minds are. When we draw something or paint something, we tend to remember that for a very long time. So, this is Antigua, Guatemala. Up until then, I didn't do much drawing, but we were over there to do surgeries on people from the highlands. They're indigenous people and they're very poor. So it was a mission trip. The anesthesiologist that I was with one afternoon pulled out this easel and put his watercolors on it and started doing a beautiful painting of this. Jim Turner, he's a great watercolor artist. And that got me going. And of course, we were in front of Cafe Condesa over there, and the water, this is a water fountain, the water comes out from those nipples of that lady on the left side. So that is that is one of my earliest drawings. And then this is a door in one of the hotels. This is a watercolor that I did in one of my trips over there. And one morning, I was really stressed out because we were going to do a lot of difficult surgeries that day. And these people, a week later, we leave. And we are very concerned as to the care they might get afterwards. So we are do the difficult cases on Monday morning. Of course, Sunday night, I didn't sleep well. I'm up, it's dark, and I am walking around in the garden of the hotel. And then I lean over to smell one of the roses, and I hear this whir. And right next to my head is a hummingbird going in and out of the roses, doesn't care that I'm there. And then disappeared. For a second, I felt this void. And then I was touched by magic. And I said, I'm going to draw this. So I came and drew some roses. Sun was coming up a little bit at that time. And I put the hummingbird there. And I wrote a few words. And then the sun was then delineated the volcano. Agua, that was in the back, if you remember the picture. That cloud-covered thing is a gigantic volcano. It is in the southern part of the Antigua. Then I drew the volcano, and the hospital where we did our surgery is that little taller building down on the right side. This is the road that we walked to do the surgeries. That is etched in my mind as well. Many of these are. This is Set Cases, 2005. We are there. Alyssa and Luis was there, and Emmy. I don't know if we were not yet, not to 2005. And that morning, I already had an enormous amount of dark chocolate-covered hazelnuts that were grown locally. You see, this is what happens when you look at a painting. The flavor emerges from right under it, at least for some of us. And I was hunting for coffee, but I saw the sun coming up and filtering through those trees. And I had my paper and pencil, and I did this. And there was a little creek. This is a very early watercolor on Ottawa River. I was going to visit my friend. The important thing is I had taken a few lessons from Frank, my teacher. The last name is evaporated. This is when I was in St. Paul. And he looked at this, and he said, that's very good. That was such an encouragement. So this is an important thing. Doesn't matter how much self-motivated we appear, there's a little bit of narcissism within all of us, that when somebody else says that looks real good, it's an incredible thing that actually very powerful encouragement. And so that's why I put it up there, because it was a landmark. Then we started coming to Iowa City because Emmy was born, and actually it was growing quite a bit. This is Emmy and I drawing together near a horse farm on Rapid Creek Road. And this is on our summer vacations when we go up into northern Minnesota. We take canoes, and Emmy and I usually go out early in the morning and canoe. I have a few drawings of that myself, but I put it here because he is a very good storyteller. I mean, we know that we are happy, And there are beautiful trees. I mean, he's just summarized everything very succinctly. I don't know if you can see this. So this will, this is Henry, the older, younger grandson. They live in Columbus now. So by this time, I had taken some classes from Joe and from Phil. But Joe introduced me to Charles Reed. He's a watercolor artist. And one of the things that he does is contour drawing. Contour drawing often is thought to be, you don't look at the paper. You just look at the object and draw like that. Actually, Charles Reed talks about just little increments. You make little lines, then look at it, make sure that it is okay. But so that gave me an ability to draw better. It looks a little bit like him, but I like the lines here that came out. I think I'm very influenced by Charles Reed's way of drawing that adds a character to his paintings and to my drawing. My next teachers were these girls. Now, I got them into drawing very young, but what happened is that I was learning watercolor. So one of the things you have to understand is that if you had a way of measuring what I am really good at is gathering art supplies and art books. And Paula is very supportive to my artwork and very complimentary, and she frames them herself very often. And but on the other hand, she is always frustrated because I am very messy. And the girls and I got into watercolor, and then I taught them how to fling. To fling the brush, and so we had our walls painted a few times. But I learned from them because they seem to have this incredible number of images that they don't have to look at things. Children at a young age looks like they have an incredible ability to take what is in their mind and put it on paper. I usually have to look at a picture, and most of my drawings are from photographs. And I actually do contour drawing from the photographs, and then it creates a composition in itself. So, but I learned to some degree from the girls to be free and not be restrained by what we are looking at. But I was teaching them that the lines that they draw could also be violated. So I love those trees in the right side. And do you remember these? You probably have never forgotten them, did you? And then they got into Barbies and these images. But I love it that a lot of kids get frustrated when the watercolor runs down. They actually learn to use them to their advantage. And this is Ruthie showing me that you don't even need a brush. You can just use your finger as effectively. So this is one of Phil's life drawings. This is not an early one. The early life drawings that I was doing at Phil's place, I think self-destructed from embarrassment. Because Phil would come behind me and he would say, head too small. And then he showed me actually how to put volume into this knee or the shoulder. He thought initially, he had hopes for me, that because I knew anatomy, that in some way or the other, he thought that would translate into drawing better. And I can I know exactly what nerves goes through that spot exactly, and what artery and vein. But I have no clue of taking a three-dimensional shoulder and putting it in two dimensions here. This is advanced. And she is actually, her right hand, which looks like actually somebody else's hand because it's darker, but she is holding it right on her McBurney's point. That's where the appendix is. So if I had seen her at the hospital, if she would have a gown on, but her hand would be exactly at that spot, and her facial expression would be of pain because she's holding her right lower abdomen. That is, she has appendicitis. But now I was able to pull this. I actually thought that I got better with the faces and portraits than I did. These are life drawings, but I was being expressive on the faces. And I tried the red chalk. I tried it for a while. Beppie always uses the crayons, the Conte crayons, and I erased so many times that it ended up having red paper. So this is one of the girls. It's hard to know which one, and it is from a photograph. This is out in Minneapolis Institute of Art. I was waiting over there for family to show up, but I did this and turned out okay, I thought. So this is just like the girls do imaginary things. One morning I got up and I said, I think I'm going to try an imaginary landscape. And and this came out of that. This is a very quick, it took me about maybe 10, 15 minutes, but it's totally an imaginary landscape, which works very well. And of course, this is one of the better ones. There are a bunch of others which are totally messed up. So whenever you feel like you need to do something, either writing a little story or a little something, or taking out a piece of paper and doing something, which, when it's done, doesn't matter how unpresentable it is, it just makes you have a little progress and you learn what you can get away with. And that is how surgery was. You learn from your mentors, and eventually it's all a matter of trial and error and practice, practice, practice. This is, I think, Sawyer. In a windy day, they were running around outside. She's standing behind a tree, probably plotting her next move. And I took a photograph of her, and then inside I did this painting. So in those days, I was also trying to learn how to tolerate. Instead of, I copied masters like Hopper and so on. They actually tend to be much more exact. They don't usually go outside the lines. And Joe Myers has been trying to let me loosen up. That's actually almost every artist that I knew that saw my work thought that I had to be loosened up. And so you can see where I'm coming from. So colors bleeding into each other don't necessarily help. So this is another example of a memory. So I brought Ruthie to her cello class, and her teachers actually was there. I could see part of her, but I didn't have time. So during this 30-minute class, I did this drawing. But I remember her hand moving on the neck of the cello, squeaking a little bit, and and she is playing. Go tell Aunt Rhody, and so I dated that, and I will never forget that moment. It is so this is a connection, teaching or being an artist together with your grandchildren or your friends adds so much to our stories and to our memories that enriches us. So in the morning, as we are having our coffee, so this is, I love doing feet. And Paula was, do you remember, can you read that book, what that was? I don't know. Anyway, she was deep into the book. So the important thing about the model is that you don't want them to move. So she was really into the book, and I actually happened to grab my pencil, and this is what came out of that. And this doesn't replace. So in the morning, if you have time, just take your paper and pencil. There's Paula drinking coffee at the bottom, and that is one of my neighbor's houses down at the end of the cul-de-sac. This is from a photograph as well. So I learned this from Charles Reed. If you look at the fingers, he puts these red on the extremities and joints and the elbows and the tip of the nose and so on, which I thought added something. Anyway, it creates almost an abstract-looking painting partly, but that is her. And I love the eyes. So then, Paula actually commissioned me, in a way, but you didn't bring her, did we? To do a portrait. So I started working on portraits, and that is one of them. That's Jamesy, and this is Ruthie. I have there's Jamesy right there. There's Ruthie. So this is how big they are. This is Ruthie's, and this is Jamesy. Others are also, some of them are big, but too heavy to bring here. But John Singer Sargent one time said, there's nothing more effective than ruining a friendship than doing a friend's portrait. It is, there it is. This makes a person tight. That I didn't need to be tightened up anymore. And it is basically, that picture over there took me, so that is the other grandson, and this is the first one that I did. This is Marielle. Now Jamesy started like this. I did a quick sketch. I like that. But then converting that to this, it took me about good 2 weeks, and I would go and do a little bit, and then a little bit of the ear. They go up and come down, look at the photograph again. It wouldn't be good. So it was time-consuming, and it actually, in some way or the other, defied eventually, I actually ended up disliking during portraits. I actually prefer watercolors. Now, Sargent did the same thing. He actually loved to go to the Alps and draw rocks and mountains and so on. He put some people over there, hardly recognizable. This is another one, Henry with his little doggy. But I didn't complete this. This was the last attempt. So one day, the story of this painting is that actually there was quite a bit of chaos at home. I don't know if the argument was about tweezers or a mascara, but often we have the daughter and mother, they live just down about a house away, so that there's a lot of sharing things. And things were not good at home. And this was a Thursday morning, and I'm trying to write something for my writing group. So I did this. And actually, it was a little different painting, but this is more fitting. This is I did with Ruthie. We planned to stay outside the lines, but it is the same flower bunch that we painted. I said I didn't know what to write about. The dry old sadness scattered like a field of poppies, once crimson, now dry, or the new stuff, like a hike in the woods, ticks and mosquitoes and the hungry black flies abound. So I step outside, gather some flowers, yellow, red, and violet, sit and do a watercolor instead. And it was very good. By the time I came back, all the dark clouds had blown away and sun was shining. This is one of Joe Myers Walker's classes, and that's a typical one of her houses, but her colors. So I followed her recommendations, and then I added some chicken. She actually advised us to add some chickens. Then I added the grandchildren over there, and at least 3 of them I can see over there, maybe 4. And this is James E. eating a cupcake. And this is in the, where is that? What falls are those? Gooseberry Falls. The girls are crossing the river. That day, my mother was, this is about 11 years ago, she and I walked to Lake of the Isles from her place on 28th Street in Minneapolis. And then she sat there taking in this late afternoon sun. This was in September. And the picture is bigger. She's looking at the little islands in the middle of Lake of the Isles. And then I decided to do this portrait of her from the photograph. And I wondered what she's thinking that time. So this is fall colors. Which one of you did that one? Okay. So I love this because you see that they intentionally now let the gravity pull down the paint, and that became the trunk. So they are now using gravity to paint, and so they have command over a water drop. This is a painting of mine from those times. And so this is just about a month ago, we went to a plein air group that Bob led. We went to Herbert Hoover Museum right in front of that. And I found this little spot and tried to get as loose as I could. And the fall colors and this is on the side. It's a little farm. That's okay, but this is Crocodile Falls, actually, northern Minnesota again. One of the girls is climbing up the rocks, and they are there on the rock in the backyard, and they are perched on it, and they do this, not uncommonly, and they almost never wear shoes. So again, I use those red spots of the toes and the heel, and I think they add some dimension to the paintings. So this is one of my last works. So the middle of the painting, the flower pot, I don't like. But what happened on the left upper, and especially what happened. So what I say what happened is that this is no longer planned. I am just intending to put colors on the drawing. And some of it I keep, but the others, as I added just pure color, and then right next to it I add water and pull it this way and add another color at one place. All of a sudden, watercolor has a life of its own. It just happens. As I said, so if I could do that middle of the flower pot, there, all those reds are a little bit too overwhelming, and I don't like it as much. But so how do I create that same part that I like? That is the other thing about watercolor or any art. When you create a work of art, just like when we write a story, just take, if you have written one good sentence, or if you have written one of the fruit out of 7 turned out to be incredible, just go back and try to duplicate that. It is a source of a good beginning rather than an end. So, doing this, art has been very good way of spending my last 7 years here, and I hope to have many more. And that made me have friends, made me have connections with my grandchildren and family. So it has been a wonderful thing, and thank you for this group of artists for mentoring me at many levels. And this is what ArtiFactory is all about. Create an environment where people like me will come in with maybe some experience or whatever, and then find a way to find their interests. And essentially, we are planting various things in this city, whether it's writing, whether it is art, and doesn't matter what the weather is like, one of those seeds will find a way to grow, because this is such a fertile ground. And thank you for being part of that fertile ground. Thank you.